In this video, I'm going to show you step by step on how to assemble an Echelon Ex-5. It's February 13th, 2021, so this is the latest and greatest edition. I'm going to give you a couple of helpful tips along the way to make your assembly of this awesome spin bike a little easier for you. So keep watching, and we'll get the next bike all assembled. I've put a couple of these together, and what works best for opening the box and getting all the parts out is a pair of scissors and a razor utility knife. I found the best way to open the box to remove the bike, make sure it's standing up and not lying down. Take your utility knife, you're going to go all the way around the top side, cutting all the tape, go down the edges, cut the box like I've shown you. Don't worry about cutting anything on the inside, there's real heavy styrofoam here. And then you can lay this front flap down, and that kind of creates a work surface for you to assemble the bike on. Once you've got all this packaging tape cut that's holding all the parts in, you could simply start pulling out all the parts, laying them out on the floor to get ready for assembly. Once you have all the small components out of these styrofoam holders, you can simply remove the two styrofoam pieces and the entire bike will slide right out onto the cardboard. Now you can access the other two pieces of styrofoam, which they also hold smaller components. Like this one here, do the same thing. Cut all the packaging tape with scissors and remove all the small parts. Now that we have all the components laid out on the floor, we can start unpackaging. And these things are packaged extremely well. You can lift off the plastic, revealing your new bike. Once you finish assembling your Echelon bike, there's going to be a lot of metal brackets and bolts that you're not going to reuse. They were only used in the shipping process. Don't throw this stuff in your garbage. Either go to a metal recycling facility or look up a welding fabricating shop and you can take the metal there and they'll throw it in their metal recycling containers. Before we begin assembly, I take all the parts to go to the front of the bike, set them towards the front, and the same with the rear. The handlebars, the handlebar stem. You're going to have a base with the wheels. Put all that stuff to the front and put the rear parts like the weight cages and the rear stabilizer towards the back of the bike. Makes it a little easier to assemble. Here's the tool kit and the hardware bag. Now it does come with some pretty generic tools, but they do work pretty well. The only thing that I would get out of your toolbox that would be a little better would be a Phillips head screwdriver. This Phillips head Allen wrench doesn't give you anything really to grip on to tighten up some of the Phillips screws. So these tools work just fine, but if you have a better Phillips screwdriver, that's going to make the assembly a little easier. Here's the Echelon instruction manual. It is a step-by-step with picture guide. It's not 100% accurate, but if you follow along with my video, it will make your assembly process a lot easier. Now one thing I highly recommend, get yourself some blue Loctite. This is the gel version. If you can only get the liquid version, that will work just fine. But these bolts will vibrate loose over time, and it's best to put on the thread locker now, and you'll never have to retighten any of the bolts. Now the first step is we need to remove this rear shipping frame. You're not going to reuse this frame or any of the bolts. I'm going to start by loosening these three screws and removing them. Loosen this one first, second, third, and then pull the bolts out. First, second, third, and then you're going to remove this cardboard protector. You're not going to reuse these bolts. Remove this cardboard protector. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. Now we're going to remove this bolt first, then this one second. And you're going to need to use this notch out for the nut on this side, and this Allen wrench on this side. You will not reuse these bolts or nuts. Now just behind the rear wheel, we need to remove these two bolts off of the shipping frame. Go ahead and remove these two bolts, and you will not reuse these. You're going to want to hold on to this cardboard and slide this shipping frame out. This you will not reuse. Use a pair of scissors and cut this packaging tape. And then also a pair of scissors to cut this protective plastic. Don't use a razor knife because you could damage the finish of the bike. The rear wheel, there's two wheel chocks, some cardboard, and a zip tie. Cut the zip tie, pull that through. Now the wheel chocks, if you'll notice this one right here, there's kind of like an L shape. This one here will pull out this side, and the front one will pull out that side. Remove the cardboard. Next, up here at the front of the bike, we're going to install the front stabilizer bar. Make sure the wheels are towards the front. If you install it like this, you won't be able to roll your bike around. It needs to go on this, wheels to the front. We need to remove these two screws with the supplied Allen key. And there's a metal bar underneath here. You're not going to reuse these or the metal bar. You have to lift up on the bike just a little bit. Line up the holes. Put yourself some Loctite on these two bolts so that they don't loosen out over time. Be careful you don't over tighten these screws. I like to get one side a little snug and then work my way back and forth. Don't tighten one side real tight and then the other side. Just get one side semi-tight, go to the other side, work your way back and forth. Make sure you don't over tighten because you can strip these out. Now we can install the rear support bar. Now it doesn't matter which way you put this on, it's the same both ways. You're going to use two of the same screws that you used in the front. Put Loctite on them. You need to lift up the bike a little bit and remove this shipping bracket and then slide the rear support in. This will not be reused. Then just line up the holes and install the two bolts. These bolts the same as you did in the front. Just get them snug on one side, work your way back and forth. Do not over tighten. And now we're going to install the seat. But what I found from assembling other bikes is these nuts are a little tight and you can't actually get it on this post. Now to install the seat, you're going to need this included wrench. And I suggest you loosen the nuts on this seat just a little bit, and that will help you install. Make sure you push the seat all the way down. There's a little notch right here that if you can see the notch, it's not all the way down. Push it all the way down, you'll see that it's fully seated. And now you're going to line up the seat straight with the bike and adjust the angle. Once you have the angle where you want it, you can go ahead and tighten the nuts. Just go from this side to this side and back and forth until you get the seat tight. Now we're going to install the dumbbell cage on the back of the seat. And if you look at the bracket, you see how this is kind of rounded and pointed? That's going to go towards the front of the bike. So it's going to mount on there like that. And in your hardware package, the screws you need are going to be these two small screws. This is where you're going to use that Phillips head on the Allen screw that's provided. But I suggest you use a good quality screwdriver. You can get the screws a little tighter and make sure you put Loctite on these screws. Here's where a big mistake can happen. We're going to install this front handlebar stem. And you have two connectors that need to come together. Now these are held in place by twisty ties. If you undo these twisty ties, the wires are going to go back up into this tube and down into this one, and you're going to have to try to fish them out. This is where I suggest you may have a helper. You can either connect these two and then undo the twisty ties. But you kind of got to hold this with one hand, connect with another, and insert it later on. It's a little hard to do with one person. So if you have another person to hold one wire, get it all connected and slide down in, it's a little bit easier. Just make sure you don't undo these twisty ties before you make the connection. If you have the connection made, you can undo the twisty tie, because these wires are kind of on a spiral coil, and this bottom one will shoot down in there and it will be very difficult to fish out. You can get it, but it's going to be a pain in the butt. So now to insert this, you're going to unscrew this, not all the way, about right there, pull out, and insert the stem. Next, you want to make sure the handlebar stem is all the way down, and we need to insert a screw through this hole. This is what the screw looks like. Now make sure that you do not drop it down into that hole. This part you have to be a little careful of. It's probably best if you shine a flashlight in there and make sure you line up the screw. Make sure you put Loctite on there so that doesn't vibrate loose. Now next we're going to install the tablet mount. And it's going to be the same situation. You're going to want to make sure that you connect the wires before you undo the twisty ties so the wires don't spring back up into the tubes. And you're going to use these two bolts, and these are the only ones that are going to take washers. Area where you may want to use a helping hand, but just make sure the wires are connected before you undo the twisty ties. Then you can slide the wire down inside the tube and install the tablet mount. Once again, make sure you use the washer. Make sure you use Loctite so these don't loosen up over time. Go ahead and insert these bolts and tighten them down. Install the handlebar, and you're going to need this round knob to install them. It kind of sits right in place, and then you're going to thread through from the bottom and then just tighten it up. Now we can install the water bottle holder. It simply slides in place, and you're going to use the last two Phillips head screws. You can install the pedals, and if you look on the crank arm, there's an R right there, there's an R on the pedal. Make sure that the R's line up and the L's line up. First thing you do is take this jam nut off like that, and now you're going to thread the pedal in. And if you look right here, it says clockwise. The right pedal is going to tighten clockwise. The left pedal will tighten counterclockwise. And now with the wrench provided, you're going to use this kind of square notch out. Then tighten the pedal onto the crank arm. And it's easiest to install this when the crank arm is straight up and down, because you have to reinstall this jam nut on the back side. And it's too hard to do that if the crank arm is to the bottom. You don't have any room. You have the pedal nut tight. You need to tighten the jam nut on the back side. And that's why it's easiest to have the crank arm up here at the top. Tighten this all the way down. Once you finish installing the left pedal, your assembly is complete. The AC adapter, which is right here, will plug in right here underneath the rear wheel. Congratulations on assembling your own Echelon bike. Total time to put one of these together for your first time is probably around 45 minutes. I've assembled a couple of them, and you can pretty easily do them in about a half hour, just taking your time, making sure all the nuts and bolts are tight. Make sure you use Loctite and the screws won't back out on you after several months of use. All the metal shipping parts, take them to a metal recycler or find a local welding shop and they'll put them in their metal recycling bin. Now the way I cut open the box, you can put everything back inside it, tape it back up, recycle that, or throw it in the garbage. Hope this video was helpful and informational for you. and thanks for watching.